Greetings to the whole world. It's Luandile here, the leader and the instructor of Maniko School. Today we're actually doing exercise 3.19 from student B's perspective, a student who's a bit more clever than student A. As you guys have, I'm hoping you guys have watched my previous solution on this exercise, and if you didn't, please do so. That way you'll see like what are kind of things one can go about doing wrong. Okay, however, I decided to simply do basic things such as creating a scanner, declaring variables that we're gonna be using to hold whatever a user decided to input. So I decided to do all those steps, fetching user inputs beforehand. That way it's gonna take less time for me to give a solution. Okay, so this is the question here in case you didn't read it. It simply says write a program that reads 3 edges for a triangle and computes the perimeter if the input is valid, otherwise display the input is invalid. The input is valid if the sum of every pair of 2 edges is greater than the remaining edge. Okay, that is pretty straightforward if you ask me. So right now what you want to do is to simply calculate the distance between 2 points, and that will be point number 1 and point number 2, right? And then you calculate the distance again between point number 1 and point number 3, and lastly you have to calculate a distance between point number 2 and point number 3. Okay, once you do that, basically the idea is you compare the sum of every 2 pairs of edges, you compare that with the remaining sum, and then you determine whether or not your user input was correct. Okay, is valid. Okay, so let's jump on to it without any waste of time. We'll simply go distance between 1 and 2. Of course, the distance formula simply tells us it's simply nothing else but the square root of x2 minus x1 all squared plus y2 minus 1y. So how we're gonna go about doing that? We'll simply use the power function, and right here we'll simply have x2 minus x1, and then we put a 2 here, and then what we then do is to add that with method power y2 minus y1, and then we put a 2, which simply says it's a square root of that. And if you recall well, what I did is on my previous solution I had more variables. I had more variables just to only do this part here, and that is not a good practice if you ask me. So it's better you avoid tons of variables. That is considered as a good solution. Likewise for distance, double distance between point number 1 and number 3, we'll do one and the same thing, which is to calculate the square root of method power of y2. This time around it's gonna be x3 minus x1, and when we want the square of that, and then we need to add that. We need to add method power and simply go y3 minus y1. Of course we need a square root of that. That raised to the exponent of 2. Okay, lastly we do one and the same thing for the distance between point number 2 and point number 3. Yeah, just like that. Okay, square root of, it's a square root. We can of course do this It is totally up to us. We can simply say x3 minus x2. We multiply that by x3 again minus x2, and then we add y3 minus y2. Again, we multiply that by one and the same thing, which is y3 minus y2. Once you do that, I mean, this is more or less the same like what we had above. It's just that this time around we're no longer using the math.pow class, but the idea is the same. We're basically getting a square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared in order to find the distance between point number 1 and point number 2. Likewise, for the other two distances, the idea is the same. So once we do that, what else we then do? We go to the part where we actually determine whether or not our input is valid. Okay, so what we then do is to simply go, we check, we simply check. What we then do is to check if distance between 1 and 2 plus distance between 1 and 3, we check if that is greater than distance between point number 2 and point number 3. If that is the case, in fact, we can do this the other way around. If this is less than or equals to this, or if distance, again, people are passing by, I'm so sorry for that. I'm gonna ask you to bear with me, folks. I'm at home right now. I'm recording this video during the day, so people are heading up and down. Anyways, I hope everyone can see what's going on the screen and can properly hear my voice. Okay, so what we want to do now is to go, if the distance between, okay, this is our second case. Our third case, we check if the distance between 1 and 3 plus the distance between 2 and 3, if that is less than or equals to distance between 1 and 2, we're gonna say that we simply know that in that case our user gave us something invalid. So we'll simply go system.out.print, make sure you enter valid points. Make sure you enter valid points. Basically, it's an error. I can simply do this so that a user would know. Otherwise, if this is not the case, then we can simply compute our perimeter. Just by doing this. It's simply gonna be the perimeter of the triangle is, we leave 4 spaces and 2 numbers after a decimal point, and we put a format specifier. Okay, what else we then do? Of course, we need to put whatever is it will be formatting right here. Again, I'm not gonna have a let me do it this way. Let me just go perimeter. I don't recommend people do this things this way, because I started by using a variable before declaring it, and it's perimeter. I'm just doing it anyways, so make sure you don't do that. So it's distance between 1 and 2 plus distance between 1 and 3 plus distance between 2 and 3. What's wrong? What seems to be a problem? So perimeter is equal to distance between 1 and 2 and 1 and 3. And lastly, where is the distance between? Did I forget? Oh, I pasted this thing. I created this variable at the wrong place. What I want to do is to put it underneath this here. Okay, with that out of the way, it is time to hit the run button. I hope everyone can see. This time around, what we did is I declared all my variables here, all the variables that will actually hold user input for the 3 points. I also created my scanner, however I called it just scanner. Again, people are yelling, folks. I'm so sorry for that, but the guy was passing by, so we're no longer gonna have that problem. So as I was saying, I created a scanner. I called it just scanner. My point here is you can put whatever variable name you like here, and then underneath that I created all of my variables to hold user input. I prompt my user to enter the values for the second point, the values for the first point, for the second point, and the values for the last point. And I did everything in one line. By that I mean I calculated a distance between two adjacent points in one line, just by using the math.square-root method and the math.pow method. Okay, I know we're not there on method yet. I know we're not there on methods yet, but we are gonna get there, I promise you, and it's gonna be fun. Okay, lastly, we did it this way. It's one and the same thing though. Okay, and then finally we calculated our perimeter. However, what we're supposed to do, you see, we only gotta do this if our user input is valid. You see, this is the right place for this. You don't want to first calculate the perimeter. Question is, what if the perimeter shouldn't be calculated? You see, by putting this line here where we put it at first, then that is considered as a bad practice, because there is a possibility that we might not be computing the perimeter in case a user input is invalid. Okay, that should be it for this tutorial. Let's try to hit the run button and see what we get. Okay, let's try something like, I'm just randomly picking numbers, folks. I don't even know what's gonna be our results, but I'm hoping. Seems like it works. I'm afraid I cannot think of the case where this thing won't work, right? Oh, perhaps let me try this. How about we have this thing at, let's our x be 0 and our y be a number like 10, right? Oh, I cannot think of a case that would make this thing not work, but you can play around with different numbers and see it yourself, you guys. Anyways, I don't want to take too much of your time, so I'm going to see you when we actually do the second, I mean the 20th exercise on this chapter, which is chapter 3. That should be it, you guys. Please make sure you leave out comments in case I made a mistake somewhere. Let me know. Feel free to do so. I'm a person, I make mistakes. But other than that, I will see you on the next tutorial, guys. There's nothing more to say. Cheers.